Hi everyone. Before we get into this audiobook, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button and drop a like. It helps me out a lot as well as contributes a lot to the channel. Now, let's get into the story. I hope you enjoy. A bitter wind howled through the forest the night she was forced to leave everything behind. The sky had been a swirl of dark clouds, heavy with unspoken threat, as if nature itself were grieving the injustice unfolding in the heart of the Silver Crescent Pack's territory. She had once stood at the Alpha's side, as Luna, her dark hair braided with ceremonial ribbons on nights of grand celebrations, her voice carrying the weight of guidance and empathy for the pack members who adored her. It seemed impossible that things could have come to this. And yet, here she was, her breath ragged, her heartbeat thundering in her ears, each step on the broken branches and damp leaves echoing the finality of her exile. She was not leaving by choice, but under the ruthless decree delivered in front of every wolf she had once called family. There had been no chance to say a proper goodbye. The lies they believed turned them against her in an instant. Hurtful accusations had shattered the gentle trust she once shared with them, casting a shadow of betrayal over everything she had spent so long to protect. The once proud role of Luna was stripped away, and a single word, rogue, became her brand. She could still recall the tension in the air, the wide stares of the younger pack members, and the silent guilt in the eyes of those who doubted the charges but were too frightened to speak. They had heard rumors, twisted accounts, that painted her as someone thirsty for power, a traitor conspiring with enemies. It all hinged on cleverly planted evidence and whispered insinuations, orchestrated by someone who stood to benefit from her downfall. She knew there was a mastermind behind this, a hidden figure controlling the narrative, but she had no proof. Her protests fell on deaf ears, her pleas overshadowed by the damning claims. The Alpha she had faithfully served seemed convinced of her guilt. Anguish tore at her heart more fiercely than the winter wind slicing through her thin jacket. She had risked her life for this pack more than once, but it only took a single cleverly staged offense to wipe away years of loyalty. They banished her under the cruel moonlight, ordering her never to return unless she wished to face swift retribution. She had stumbled through the forest for hours, no home to call her own, and not a single ally in sight. Tears stung her eyes as she clutched her tattered pack close, containing only meager supplies. She had never expected to be forced into rogue life, always believing that loyalty and love were enough to protect her. The thought that someone she trusted had carefully plotted her downfall. But the Alpha she cared for more deeply than she cared to admit had looked at her with betrayal in his gaze, cut deeper than any physical wound ever could. The memory of that final tribunal haunted her, stoic elders looking upon her with contempt, several witness statements declaring she had conspired to harm the Alpha and seize power for herself. Even now, the shame burned in her chest like a hot brand. Over time, she learned to live with the pain, scraping by on her own in hostile territories, hunted by lesser packs that despised rogues and threatened by mercenaries who saw an exiled wolf as easy prey. Her body bore the scars of battles she was forced to fight, scuffles for scarce resources, and the harsh reality of living outside pack boundaries. Where once her warm presence as Luna brought relief to the injured and comforted the grieving, now every muscle in her body was wound tight with suspicion. Her mind became a fortress, her senses sharpened to detect threats in every shadow. Days blurred into nights with a relentless cycle of survival, but despite the hardships, her spirit endured. She refused to break completely, refused to surrender to the label of rogue as if it were some unchangeable brand on her destiny. She often told herself that the banishment was merely a detour, that fate had a reason for dragging her through the dirt. That vow gave her the strength to continue. Each new scar reminded her she had not died, that she still had a purpose to fulfill. In her darkest hours, she dreamed of returning to face those who had wronged her, to unearth the true culprit, and to clear her name. Yet as the years passed without contact from the pack, the one's fiery determination to reclaim her place was tempered by an ache for justice, not acceptance. She came to realize that she did not need them to restore her honor. The truth was her own. Rather than blindly longing to be forgiven, she yearned to see those who had orchestrated her downfall held accountable. In the cold nights when the moon was only a thin crescent hanging like a pale scythe in the sky, she could almost hear the rustle of voices that once filled her old packhouse. She would recall the nights where she guided the younger wolves through their transitions, ensuring they remained calm during the first surge of power. Her memory drifted back to the feasts and gatherings in the vast clearing, where the pack would celebrate hunts, harvests, births, and alliances. She had stood at the Alpha's side, radiating a quiet strength and compassion that made her presence a comfort to many. To lose all that in a single night of corruption and deceit tore at her soul, but the memory alone could not quell her growing determination. Vengeance was not her style, but justice certainly was. Even so, she sometimes wondered if she would have the courage or resources to make a real stand. It was easier to remain hidden, to nurse wounds and bide her time. Early on, she encountered a few other rogues wandering the boundary lines of various packs. Most were lone wolves with haunted eyes, burdened by secrets and heartbreak. Some recognized her face from rumors, the exiled Luna who had supposedly betrayed her own. She endured their scorn, but occasionally found a glimmer of sympathy. They exchanged stories around small fires, none daring to trust the other fully, but clinging to these transient moments of companionship. In these interactions, she discovered how widespread the injustice could be in the werewolf hierarchy. Not every pack was righteous. Not every alpha was benevolent. Each rogue carried a story of betrayal or violence. Some fled from packs that used them as pawns. Others ran to escape oppressive leadership. Their shared experiences made her realize that banishment was not always just. Sometimes it was a tool to consolidate power, used by those who thrived on removing any perceived threat or inconvenience. As the months became years, she honed her survival skills and studied rumors that drifted through the rogue networks. Whispers spoke of a growing discontent among several packs, referencing corruption, missing wolves, and ominous alliances. She pieced together clues, suspecting that the same hidden hand that cast her out might be weaving an even larger web. She learned to fight with more precision and stealth than ever before, to hide her scent using the pungent leaves of certain plants, and to manipulate pack wards if needed. Through discipline and unyielding resolve, she became a formidable presence among the rogues, known as a quiet wanderer who could be coaxed into fighting only when absolutely necessary, yet who struck with uncanny efficiency when cornered. Despite all she had lost, her sense of justice and empathy remained, shining brightly in a grim existence. In one of these scattered encounters, she found an unexpected companion, a solitary wolf who carried the weight of a troubled past on his shoulders. He was neither eager to share his burdens nor quick to trust, but something about their shared resolve and the unspoken grief each carried sparked a silent partnership. They never formalized it with words, for words in the rogue world could be cheap, but they helped each other through perilous passes and rough hunts. He told her of rumors swirling around the Silver Crescent pack. An ambitious wolf had taken a high position, shifting the pack's direction toward more aggressive practices. The new leadership allegedly prioritized expansions of territory under questionable pretenses, inciting uneasy friction with neighboring packs. The news shocked her, but it also lit a spark in her chest, for she recognized the potential link. Whoever had orchestrated her downfall might be reaping the benefits, continuing a twisted plan. The more she listened, the more she discovered that her old pack was not the bastion of unity and fairness she once believed it to be. She also realized that the alpha she had served might be battling forces beyond his understanding. Though bitterness lingered, she felt the pull to intervene, not out of lingering loyalty, but out of a sense of responsibility to those innocents who still resided in the Silver Crescent territory. A deep chord of compassion resonated within her. She could not stand by while more wolves fell victim to the same brand of deceit that had destroyed her life. Yet the memory of her banishment stung. She questioned whether her return would spark open conflict, or if any of her old allies would even recognize her after all this time. Would she be turned away at the border, or worse, torn apart on sight? That questioning kept her awake some nights. She remembered the searing anger in the alpha's voice when he commanded her to leave, the heartbreak that twisted his features, and the condemnation that sat heavily in the eyes of each onlooker. She had loved them, each one, even the alpha, in a way that transcended ordinary bonds. The severing of that connection had left a wound that refused to fully heal. But no matter how deep the hurt, she could not let fear paralyze her from doing the right thing. If there was indeed a puppet master within the pack, pulling strings and seeking to further their agenda, she intended to unravel that plot. She owed it to herself, and to the wolves who had once put their faith in her. They might have failed her in that crucial moment, but she could not, in good conscience, abandon them to a fate she suspected would be far worse if left unchecked. Painful memories accompanied every step she took back toward her former home. Late one autumn evening, after months of carefully mapping safe passages, forging uneasy alliances, and gathering scraps of valuable information, she stood at the edge of Silver Crescent territory. The trees were just as tall as she remembered, and the quiet hush of the wind through the leaves felt like a distorted echo of the night she was sent away. Her rogue companion lingered nearby, a solemn figure who understood the weight of returning to the place that cast her out. She felt his presence as a grounding force, though neither spoke. Their bond was one of practical necessity and a mutual respect that blossomed slowly from shared adversity. They had fought side by side against small patrols from other territories, braved ambushes, and crossed paths with dangerous rogues who had been little more than feral. Through it all, he had proven himself when she needed an ally. Now, at the cusp of a new dawn, she prepared herself for what was to come, her first step back onto the soil of her banishment. That night, she dreamed of the past. A fleeting vision of the alpha's face hovered behind her eyelids, memories dancing of how he once gripped her hand during pack ceremonies, trusting her completely. She heard echoes of laughter from gatherings. She smelled the comforting aroma of pine logs burning in the hearth. She felt the intangible warmth of the pack's acceptance, a sense of home that she had never found again after exile. Then the dream morphed, painting scenes of betrayal. The ceremony that stripped her of her title flashed behind her closed eyes, followed by recollections of the alpha's voice proclaiming her guilt. She jerked awake, sweat lining her brow, chest heaving with the painful recollection of that night. Though she was anxious about the confrontation that lay ahead, something in her heart told her that the time had come to face it all. On the morning she and her companion approached the southern border, tension thrummed beneath her skin. The territory looked unchanged at first glance. The same towering pines stretched skyward, The same outcroppings of rock jutted out in the distance. But beneath that familiar facade, she sensed a charged atmosphere, a subtle difference that made her hackles rise. The trolls seemed more frequent, and the wolves guarding the border were armed with a watchful intensity. She recognized few faces among them, and she was grateful for that. She could not risk being discovered this early. Carefully, she and her companions skirted the edges of the territory, staying out of sight. They were certain the pack's wards would detect them soon enough. The wards could sense rogue energy, but she possessed enough knowledge of the old magic to slip past the first line of detection. If she had not once been Luna, the wards might have snagged her instantly. But she had spent countless nights studying the pack's protective enchantments and knew their vulnerabilities. She guided her companion through them, heart pounding the entire time. It took many cautious hours of movement to find a place to hide, a secluded grove near a creek where they could catch their breath. There, they talked in low voices, finalizing their next steps. She disclosed her plan to gather more information from the outskirts, to find pack members who might be sympathetic or harbor doubts about her banishment. She had to confirm who was in power, who had betrayed her, and how the Alpha fit into the new hierarchy. Her companion listened calmly, occasionally offering a piece of insight from the rumors he had collected. They knew they had to be strategic. Charging into the main settlement and demanding answers would only result in her immediate capture, or possibly worse. She was no longer the revered Luna. She was, in the eyes of those who believed the lies, a criminal returning to commit further treachery. Despite her attempts at self-control, emotions churned in her. The small grove reminded her of a place she once used to collect medicinal herbs. She could practically see her past self kneeling by the water, rinsing foraged plants. Before, she had always been accompanied by younger wolves, eager to learn her ways. Even the memory of them tugged at her heart, fueling her determination to keep them safe from the corruption lurking in the pack's leadership. The question that tormented her was whether any of them might still believe in her innocence. Or had they grown up hating her name, taught to see her as a traitor who once threatened the Alpha's life. As twilight fell, she left her companion in the grove and ventured alone closer to the heart of the territory, carefully masking her scent. She needed to move swiftly and quietly. The moon rose, pale light filtering through the branches, illuminating her path. The structures of the main settlement soon came into view. Cabins, barracks, and the large meeting hall built of strong timber. Memories flooded back, making her breath catch in her throat. She took shelter behind a thick tree trunk, scanning the roads for patrolling guards. She was prepared for a quick escape if needed. The place was busier than she remembered for this hour, with small clusters of wolves moving about, some in human form, others partially shifted. Anxiety rippled through her. Something was amiss, yet she could not tell exactly what. Just as she was considering moving closer, a scent stirred the still air. It was familiar, like a hint of cedar mixed with a trace of storm-charged ozone. Her chest tightened, because she realized it belonged to the Alpha. Although she had steeled herself for the possibility of confronting him, she did not expect it to happen so soon. From her vantage point, she glimpsed him passing along the main thoroughfare. He moved with the same lithe power she remembered, but his posture seemed weighed down by invisible burdens. She had never thought to see him again, not in the flesh, not wearing that same leather jacket he wore on official duties in cooler weather. Her heart thundered as a maelstrom of emotion twisted inside her. She pressed herself tighter against the tree, resisting the urge to call out or rush forward. Several wolves accompanied the Alpha. One, a tall, broad-shouldered male, walked close beside him, occasionally leaning in to speak. She recognized the powerful stance of a beta, though not the face. In the old days, The pack's beta had been a stern but fair man with salt and pepper hair. This younger wolf must have replaced him. Something about his body language radiated tension, a sense of hidden animosity that made her hackles rise. She wondered if he was the figure behind the nightmares that plagued the pack, or if he was just another pawn in a bigger game. She strained her ears to pick up snatches of conversation. The night air carried fragments of words. Something about border patrol expansions, new alliances with an unknown pack, and rising conflicts with neighboring territories. The alpha's expression revealed concern, but the beta seemed too eager, pushing for aggression. A swirl of bitter memories made her grit her teeth. Once, she might have stood at the alpha's side, calmly steering him toward peaceful resolutions, cautioning him against needless shows of force. Now he was under someone else's influence, and she was but a ghost in the shadows. Had he truly believed her guilt that night, or had he simply yielded to political pressure? She might never know unless she confronted him. Yet she could not reveal herself without endangering her entire plan. Her fists clenched against the bark of the tree as she watched them vanish from view, leaving her with a storm of questions. Why did the alpha look so troubled if he had supposedly rid the pack of a traitor? Why did this new beta's presence feel so ominous? She waited until the road was clear before slipping back into the gloom of the trees. Her breath came in ragged pulls, adrenaline surging. She knew she had to hurry back to her companion before the roving patrols grew too thick. The silent forest loomed around her, each snap of a twig underfoot echoing in her ears. The moonlight gave her just enough illumination to find her path. Her thoughts spiraled around the alpha's face, the tension she sensed in him. Could it be that he discovered the betrayal only after her exile, or was he simply grappling with the consequences of the choices he had made? She hoped with a desperate edge that he had discovered the truth. But if he did, why was she still a hunted rogue? The next morning, she strategized with her companion by the creek. She explained in hushed tones what she had observed, her intuition that the alpha might not be an entirely willing participant in whatever was happening to the pack. Still, she had to be cautious. Even if he regretted banishing her, the wound between them was too deep to ignore. Her companion suggested trying to make contact with a few neutral members, particularly the older wolves who might harbor doubts about the new beta. Perhaps there was a chance to gather more precise intel without directly confronting the alpha just yet. She agreed, though anxiety gnawed at her. If any of those elders recognized her, they might raise an alarm immediately. If the lies told about her had taken firm root over the years, she could be branded as an agitator and attacked. She swallowed her fears, forging ahead with a determination that had carried her through worse situations. That evening, she traveled closer to one of the outlying training grounds, recalling that some of the elders used to conduct early morning drills there for younger wolves. It was a perfect place for discreet observation. Indeed, she spotted two older wolves she remembered from her days as Luna. Both had served on the council and had once shown her warmth. They spoke quietly, their expressions grave, while a group of young wolves worked through shifting exercises in the clearing. Her heart ached to see them. A wave of nostalgia swept over her, combined with a bittersweet anger. It seemed like an entire generation had come of age in her absence. She longed to approach the elders, to ask if they ever questioned the official story of her exile. Yet revealing herself carried enormous risks. She had no idea if they had been complicit in her downfall. Unable to contain her curiosity, she drifted closer, careful to remain hidden behind dense shrubs. She caught fragments of their conversation. They spoke of tension between the alpha and the new beta, mentioning that the beta had recently been pressuring the alpha to accept a questionable alliance with a neighboring pack rumored to practice dark methods. They discussed the alpha's hesitance, but also his isolation, how others on the council seemed influenced by the beta's promises of expansion and power. The mention of that alliance made her blood run cold. She had heard rumors of that pack during her wanderings, stories of brutality and cruelty. She pressed a hand to her chest, inhaling slowly as she pieced the puzzle together. The pack's new direction matched a shadowy pattern she had observed in rogue circles. If the Silver Crescent pack fell under the influence of that ruthless faction, it could mean devastation for her old home and the surrounding territories. One of the elders sighed, mentioning how different things might have been if the previous Luna was still here. The other elder quickly looked around, as if the very mention of her name might be dangerous. She felt a pang of sorrow. She wanted to step out and say, "I am here," to declare her innocence. But she knew the time was not right. The second elder lowered his voice, muttering that the pack had lost so much faith after her banishment, and that many doubted the truth behind the accusations. He added that talking about it too openly could result in punishment from the new power structure. Her heart hammered with both validation and pain. Some still believed in her, yet fear kept them silent, allowing the beta's influence to grow. The conversation drifted to other matters, and she crouched there, absorbing as much as she could until the light began to dim. She slipped away, mind racing. She realized how crucial it was to expose the conspirator who had framed her. She had to spare her old pack from further descent into darkness. She also recognized the Alpha might be a prisoner of his own guilt or of the manipulations around him. Perhaps, if she could unmask the real culprit, the Alpha might reclaim his better judgment. Yet she did not know how to do that without risking capture. She quietly made her way back to the grove, where her companion waited, determined to plot their next move. Night fell heavy, and she felt both exhausted and electrified with purpose. As she lay beside the creek, the gentle sound of water, a distant lull, she remembered how once she would fall asleep in the Alpha's arms, secure in the knowledge that their pack was stable and strong. Now, she had only the cold ground beneath her, and the faint hope of an uncertain plan. Yet the flicker of optimism in her chest glowed brighter than it had in a long while. She had found a crack in the darkness. There were wolves who doubted the accusations, who yearned for a different path than the one the new regime was steering them toward. If she could find a way to rally them or share with them the truth, the entire pack might stand against the corruption festering from within. In the deep hours of the night, she whispered her frustrations and hopes to the bright moon overhead. She thought about the Alpha, recalling his gentleness beneath the hard exterior of a leader. She thought of how her heart used to swell with affection when he looked at her, trusting her insight. Now, memories clashed with the present reality. She turned her face away from the moon, eyes brimming with tears she refused to shed fully. There was no sense clinging to the past or longing for acceptance that might never come again. Her return was not about finding a way back into the Alpha's arms, but about ensuring the safety of the innocent. If, in the course of that mission, she found the closure her heart needed, then perhaps that would be enough. Revenge was not her motivation, nor was the naive hope of returning as the beloved Luna. She sought justice, and maybe a sliver of vindication for the pain she had endured. At dawn, she rose to the crisp, cool air, determination coursing through her. Every muscle felt taut, ready for battle if necessary. She and her companion spoke in hushed, urgent tones, forging a plan to contact one of the elders who might be more open to conversation. She told him of the two she had seen near the training grounds. specifically the one who hinted at disbelief in the official story. The plan was risky. They decided to wait until the elder was alone and then carefully orchestrate a private meeting. They would not reveal her identity until necessary, but they would offer proof of a conspiracy. She had collected small pieces of evidence during her years in exile. Scraps of messages, testimonies from rogues who had encountered certain pack members under suspicious circumstances. She carried it all in a worn leather pouch, hoping it might be enough to sway those still uncertain. With trepidation, they set their plan into motion. Over the next few days, she observed the elder's schedule, learning when he took solitary walks or visited the training grounds at odd hours. Eventually, she found her chance one evening when he lingered after a session, overseeing a group of novices practicing their transformations. Once they dispersed, he remained behind, gazing at the moonlit clearing with an expression that spoke of nostalgia and concern. She watched him from a distance, her heart pounding. This was the moment. If she had judged his character correctly, perhaps he would help her. If she was wrong, it could end in disaster. She swallowed her fear, stepped out from the cover of the trees, and approached cautiously. In the gloom, the elder sensed her presence and turned, posture tensing. She kept her hands visible, showing she posed no threat. Her voice, lowered to a near whisper, carried a tremor she could not entirely suppress. She told him she had a message concerning the truth of what happened years ago. A tale of treachery and mounting danger in the pack. He almost dismissed her, suspicion flaring in his eyes, but something in her tone made him pause. She did not reveal her face fully, cloaking herself in the shadow of her hood. She spoke of the new beta's questionable alliances, of infiltration by darker forces. She hinted that the official narrative of the previous Luna's guilt was riddled with lies and promised she could show him evidence. At first he was guarded, pressing her on why he should trust a stranger. But when she relayed certain details only a former Luna or trusted council member would know, small, intimate facts about the pack's spiritual traditions and signals they used to mark gatherings, his skepticism wavered. She could see curiosity and fear warring in his eyes. He demanded to know who she really was. She hesitated, her heart hammering so loudly she could barely think. Revealing herself felt like a leap into a dark void. Yet she sensed this was the only way to gain his aid. Slowly, she lifted her hood, letting the moonlight fall upon her features. A gasp escaped him. He reeled back, eyes darting around the clearing, evidently torn between alarm and a flicker of what might have been relief. He rasped her name, voice thick with disbelief. She bowed her head, acknowledging that she was, indeed, the banished Luna. She waited for him to call for help, to lash out at her in anger. But instead, the elder's face twisted with a mixture of grief and astonishment. He took a tentative step closer, whispering that many had doubted the circumstances of her exile. Yet fear and the pack's laws bound them to silence. She felt a wave of gratitude crash over her. There was at least one soul here willing to hear her out. She spoke rapidly, aware that at any moment they could be discovered. Her words poured forth in a torrent of explanations. The betrayal she suspected, the evidence she had gathered, the rumors that the new beta had orchestrated her fall from grace to grab power. She implored the elder to consider how the pack's direction had changed, how the alpha might have been manipulated. The elder grew pale, his eyes darting around as though searching for unseen watchers. He told her that the new beta held the alpha's ear, that the alpha seemed burdened by regret, but unwilling or unable to openly challenge the new regime. The entire pack was on edge, caught between loyalty to tradition and fear of the unknown that the beta introduced. She pressed a worn pouch into his hands, instructing him to read its contents away from prying eyes. She then asked him to share it with the few council members who still believed in fairness. Before departing, she made him promise not to mention her presence unless he was certain the other person could be trusted. He looked at her with wide eyes, as though seeing a ghost, and assured her he would do what he could, though he warned her that the beta's influence ran deep. She nodded, her heart pounding with a grim mix of hope and dread. She slipped back into the shadows, aware that she had taken a dangerous step. That night, she and her companion relocated to another hidden spot in the forest. She could barely sleep, nerves stretched taut. She hoped the elder would stay true to his word, that he would not succumb to fear or betray her location to the new beta. She also silently prayed that the alpha might finally see the truth in the evidence she provided. Though bitterness still stung in her, she remembered the alpha as a wolf of integrity once. She yearned for him to show that side again. A sense of momentum had begun to gather. For years she had roamed, ostracized and alone, longing to unravel the treachery that took everything from her. Now, at last, she had taken the first real step toward exposing it. The question looming over her was whether her efforts would be enough to upend the rot creeping through the heart of the Silver Crescent pack. As dawn crept across the horizon, turning the sky a pale gold, she stood by the gentle stream and gazed at her reflection in the water. In that reflection, she hardly recognized the woman she once was. The eyes staring back were the same color, but they held a depth of pain and resilience that spoke to her trials as a rogue. She realized she was no longer the naive Luna who believed that unconditional loyalty would protect her from betrayal. She had grown fierce, protective, and cunning. Yet she still harbored a spark of compassion, a desire to see her old pack liberated from whatever scheme threatened to corrupt it entirely. As she turned away, she silently vowed that she would not stop until the truth was laid bare, and those who had orchestrated her downfall faced the justice they deserved. In the days that followed, tension rippled through the Silver Crescent territory like an invisible current. Although she kept to the outskirts, she sensed a change in the patrol patterns. Wolves combed the borders more frequently, even venturing into the deeper parts of the forest where she and her companion had been hiding. They had to be more careful than ever, concealing their scents with potent herbs and moving only after nightfall. The trees offered some cover, but she knew the pack's hunters were skilled trackers. If they detected even the slightest hint of her presence, she would be forced into a confrontation she was not yet prepared to face. She wondered if this sudden uptick in security was a coincidence or a direct consequence of her meeting with the elder. Perhaps he had shown the evidence to someone whose reaction had been extreme or had inadvertently raised suspicions. Her companion advised that they take caution. At his suggestion, they moved between a series of temporary shelters each night, refusing to linger too long in any one location. That constant state of motion wore on her nerves, reminding her of the restless days right after her banishment, when she was always looking over her shoulder. But she refused to give in to fear. She clung to the hope that the elder's caution would prevail, that he would know how to approach the other council members without drawing the beta's immediate wrath. Several nights later, she ventured nearer to the settlement once again, leaving her companion at a safe distance. Guided by moonlight, she crept through the thick underbrush, skirting the edges of a wide clearing. A hush had settled, broken only by the hoot of an owl and the rustle of nocturnal animals. She could see the silhouettes of huts and the glow of torches near the pack's main gathering area. Her heart jolted when she spotted a small group of wolves gathered by a large bonfire, their voices carrying on the crisp night air. She recognized the alpha among them, standing apart, a grim look on his face as he listened to animated conversation from 3 or 4 others. One of them was the beta, towering and broad, posture brimming with self-assurance. She tried to edge closer, the flickering firelight illuminating tense expressions. Though she could not catch every word, she made out phrases like border threats, rogue sightings, and territory expansion. The beta's tone was forceful, advocating for swift action against rogues and stricter patrols. The alpha's replies were quieter, occasionally cutting through the beta's diatribe with measured disagreement. Despite that, the beta held the upper hand in the exchange, if only by sheer intensity. She saw the alpha stiffen, a flicker of anger in his eyes. Yet the beta pressed on, citing the need to quell potential rebellions before they started. The mention of rebellion made her heart pound. Was he referencing her, or simply using fear to tighten control? She shifted her position, careful not to snap any twigs beneath her feet. Her vantage point let her catch sight of two of the older council members who stepped forward, glancing nervously between the alpha and beta. She recognized the elder she had approached. His gaze slid across the crowd, a flicker of worry in his expression. He did not speak up, likely fearing the beta might twist his words. Another council member, an older female with streaks of silver in her hair, addressed the alpha directly. She pleaded for a balanced approach, cautioning that the pack should not be rash in expanding territory or cracking down on potential threats without concrete evidence. The beta scoffed, dismissing her as overly cautious. The alpha held up a hand for silence, a flash of alpha authority emanating from him, though he still seemed caught between logic and the aggressive stance his second-in-command championed. As the conversation continued, she noticed the subtle shift in the group's posture. Some, particularly the younger wolves, nodded in agreement with the beta's hawkish approach. Others, mostly older members, looked uneasy. The alpha, however, stood at a crossroads, his face reflecting the weight of 1,000 worries. The flamellet scene hammered home the realization that the pack was deeply divided, with fear fueling the beta's rise in influence. She felt a wave of protectiveness stir within her. This was not the pack she once knew. Suspicion had seeped in. Allies were uncertain. The alpha appeared torn, as if he wanted to rein in the beta's ambitions but lacked the collective support to do so safely. Suddenly, a loud cracking noise from the other side of the clearing startled them all. A branch had snapped in the forest gloom. Immediately, the beta barked a command, and two wolves darted to investigate. Her instincts screamed for her to move away, to circle out of range, though she suspected the noise had not come from her direction. But the tension spiking in the clearing was undeniable. The alpha looked around warily, while the beta's eyes narrowed, scanning the tree line. She took that momentary distraction to slip deeper into the forest. Her heart pounded as she navigated among the towering pines, making sure to cover her tracks. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, and she did not slow down until she was certain she was far from prying eyes. When she reunited with her companion, she relayed what she had witnessed, her voice hushed and urgent. He listened intently, concluding that the pack teetered on the brink of a power struggle. It became more vital than ever for them to forge alliances with those inside who doubted the beta. That meant taking greater risks. They decided that her companion, who was unknown to them, might try to make contact with one of the younger wolves, feeding them hints of the corruption. She would continue seeking out older members who remembered her more compassionate reign as Luna. Perhaps they could orchestrate a quiet meeting with the alpha, letting him see the evidence in private. The thought of coming face to face with him again made her chest tighten with conflicting emotions. Hurt, fear, and a lingering thread of something that might have once been love. The following evening, her companion set out on his mission. He scouted near the training grounds, hoping to intercept a younger wolf who might be less entangled in the beta's sphere of influence. Meanwhile, she returned to a secluded vantage point where she could observe the settlement from afar, searching for a sign that the elder had successfully swayed any of the council members. Time crawled by. Days melted together, as they carried out small acts of subterfuge, leaving coded notes, discreetly approaching those who seemed open to doubt. She felt the invisible weight of the pack's suspicion pressing down on her, a sense that the beta was tightening his net. Twice she nearly came face to face with patrols, only barely evading detection by slipping behind fallen logs or climbing trees to hide among thick branches. She knew it was only a matter of time before the tension snapped, unleashing the open conflict simmering beneath the surface. One night, as the moon reached its zenith, she found herself drawn back to the outskirts of the main settlement. Nostalgia pulled at her like an undertow. She walked carefully through a narrow path that led behind the old meeting hall. Years ago, she had roamed these grounds freely, a respected leader. Now, she was forced to skulk in the shadows. The memory of the night she was banished flared up. She recalled how the entire pack had surrounded her, condemning her with glares, the Alpha's harsh decree echoing in her ears. She clenched her fists, swallowing back the surge of bitterness. In the hush of the night, she vowed that she would never again be brought to her knees by lies and corruption. As if sensing her presence, footsteps approached. She tensed, ready to bolt, when she recognized the silhouette of the elder she had confided in. He moved stealthily, his expression grim. Glancing over his shoulder, he motioned for her to step forward. She did so, adrenaline spiking. He whispered that he had shown the evidence she gave him to a couple of trusted council members, but the climate of fear was so pronounced that most were terrified of speaking up. The new beta had eyes and ears everywhere, ready to punish any hint of disloyalty. However, a small number among them were now convinced of the plot against her, and they were secretly willing to assist. The elder explained that the Alpha was struggling, increasingly pressured by the beta's demands, and manipulated by half-truths. He suspected the Alpha harbored guilt over her exile, but the beta had consolidated so much power that challenging him would require strong backing. He then relayed that he had managed to arrange a discreet meeting with the Alpha. It would happen near an abandoned farmhouse on the fringes of the territory, a place seldom visited these days. The elder urged her to come unarmed and accompanied by someone she trusted, but to keep the group small and hidden. If the Alpha saw her sincerity and the evidence she possessed, perhaps he would finally take action against the beta. The elder's eyes shone with urgency, tempered by caution. There was no guarantee that the Alpha would be swayed, or that he was not already a willing participant in the beta's schemes. She, however, felt a flicker of hope. Despite the swirling danger, this meeting could be a turning point. She thanked him quietly and slipped away into the night, heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. She shared the news with her companion, who was immediately wary. They both considered the possibility of a trap. Could the Alpha be luring her out, only to have her arrested or worse? She admitted the risk was real, but pointed out that if they did nothing, the pack would only sink deeper into the beta's clutches. Time was running out, and the net of suspicion was tightening. The chance to confront the Alpha directly was their best option to spark change from within. After deliberation, they agreed to proceed, but to remain vigilant. Her companion would watch from a concealed vantage point while she met with the Alpha. If things went wrong, he would step in, or at least provide a distraction to facilitate her escape. Over the next day, she barely slept. Anxious thoughts roiled in her mind. She recalled the Alpha's kindness in days past, the slow-blooming trust between them when she first became Luna. She remembered how they had stood against outside threats together, forging alliances to protect the pack. She also remembered his face the night she was exiled, twisted by pain and disappointment. Uncertainty gnawed at her. Would he look at her now with regret, or resent her return? She could not afford to let her emotions overshadow that bigger mission. The entire pack's future hung in the balance, not just her own redemption. At dusk, they set out toward the abandoned farmhouse on the far western side of the territory. The structure was little more than a skeleton of rotted wood, the barn doors hanging precariously from rusted hinges. Overgrown grasses and thickets made it difficult to navigate, which suited their purposes. Her companion took a strategic position in the dense foliage, ensuring a clear line of sight to the main entrance. She waited by the shadow of a collapsed fence, scanning the horizon for any sign of approaching wolves. Her heart hammered so loudly she wondered if it could be heard through the stillness of the night. Finally, distant movement caught her eye. Two figures approached, moving cautiously. As they drew closer, she recognized the elder's silhouette. Beside him was the Alpha, tall and commanding, though his shoulders were tense. Even from a distance, she sensed the internal turmoil rolling off him. Anxiety flared within her, but she forced herself to remain still, controlling her breathing. When they reached the farmhouse yard, the Alpha gave a subtle nod to the elder, who then stepped away, presumably to keep watch. The Alpha advanced alone, stopping a few paces from her. The moonlight bathed them both in a pale glow, lending an ethereal quality to this long-awaited reunion. For a moment, neither spoke. She felt the weight of years pressing down on them, years of unanswered questions, pain, and betrayal. His face was partially cast in shadow, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. His voice, when it finally broke the silence, was low and unsteady. He asked if she had truly betrayed them. It was a question laced with doubt and desperation, a question that betrayed more of his buried guilt than anything else. She answered softly that she never had. She told him of her years in exile, how she had gathered proof of a conspiracy that framed her, how she suspected the Beta was the puppet master orchestrating a takeover. Words poured out in a hushed urgency, each revelation punctuated by the anguish she had endured. She tried to remain controlled, even though her voice shook with the intensity of reliving it all in front of the one who had banished her. The Alpha's hands clenched at his sides. He looked torn between anger and remorse, as though he wanted to roar at the world for the lies that had splintered his pack. He admitted that over time, he had come to suspect something was amiss with the official story of her betrayal, but the evidence against her was so convincing back then, and the pack demanded punishment. The new Beta had exploited that moment of crisis, stepping in as a supportive figure when everyone else turned on her. The Alpha's gaze flickered with shame as he recounted how he had struggled to reconcile the memory of her compassion with the accusations. The doubt, however, was overshadowed by the demands of leadership and the coming manipulations of a cunning second-in-command. That hold had grown stronger each year. He admitted that the Beta was pushing the pack down a path he feared, but he felt trapped, uncertain who to trust. She listened, her heart aching with a mix of sorrow and relief. She realized that part of her longed to hear him say he never truly believed she could harm the pack. Yet another part of her recognized the terrible burden leadership placed on him. She handed him more of the documents she possessed. Marked maps, receipts of clandestine meetings between the Beta and known criminals, testimonies from rogues who had encountered suspicious scouts linked to the Silver Crescent Pack. Each page was a dagger in the illusions of loyalty the Beta had spun. The Alpha's eyes scanned the papers, his features growing steadily darker. She could almost feel his fury building. He understood that if the Beta was orchestrating such shady dealings, it threatened the very soul of the pack. A quiet hush settled, broken only by the wind rustling the tall grass. The Alpha's voice trembled with suppressed rage as he swore that if what she said was true, he owed her an immeasurable debt, an apology beyond words. But he also reminded her that it would not be easy to topple the Beta's network. The Beta had allies on the council, younger wolves eager for more power, and a network of intimidation tactics. The Alpha could not simply throw him out without hard evidence that even the Loyalists could not ignore. And, with the tensions running high, they had precious little time before the Beta made his next move, potentially forging an official alliance with the ruthless outside pack. She nodded, meeting his gaze. She understood the precarious position. Still, the fact that the Alpha was willing to listen and perhaps fight to reclaim the pack was enough for her to believe this might be the beginning of the end for the lies that ruined her life. They spent precious minutes strategizing in hushed tones. The Alpha proposed that she and her companion gather more rogues' testimonies while he rallied those in the pack who still respected his leadership. If enough voices spoke out against the Beta and the evidence was clear, the Beta would have no choice but to face trial. Her eyes glimmered with cautious hope. She told him there was a small network of rogues who had reason to resent the Beta's tactics. Recalling the handful of ex-pack wolves and outcasts who shared stories around those lonely campfires, she realized many of them might be willing to speak, given the right assurances. The Alpha vowed to protect any who came forward. His voice resonated with the authority she remembered so well, but was laced now with a certain humility. Before they could finalize their plan, the sound of howls erupted in the distance. The Alpha stiffened, eyes narrowing, and she felt the hair on her arm stand on end. Urgency crackled in the air. She glanced around, spotting the Elder frantically waving a warning from the far corner of the yard. A patrol was approaching, likely drawn by the presence of trespassers. The Alpha's eyes darted back to her, and for a split second they were both slammed with the memory of the night she was banished. This time, though, it was different. She refused to run blindly. He refused to condemn her with a single word. Instead, he hissed that she needed to go. He would buy them as much time as he could by intercepting the patrol. She gave a terse nod. Their gazes locked, a silent promise exchanged. They would see this through. Then she bolted, disappearing into the tall grass and dark shadows. Her companion swiftly joined her, and they moved silently into the thick cover of the forest. The Alpha and the Elder stepped forward into the moonlit clearing, meeting the patrol with vague excuses about investigating suspicious activity. She watched from a distance as the torch-bearing wolves looked suspicious, but the Alpha's authority stilled their questions. Once satisfied, the patrol dispersed to continue their sweep. She let out a breath she did not realize she was holding, relief washing over her. For the first time in years, she felt the faintest glimmer of trust rekindling in her chest. The Alpha had not betrayed her. He had, in fact, protected her from discovery. Perhaps, after all the heartache, they stood on the same side again. Under the canopy of rustling leaves, her companion quietly acknowledged that this was a crucial turning point. The Alpha's cooperation meant they might actually unearth the truth and bring it to light. But it also raised the stakes tremendously. If the Beta caught wind of the Alpha's sudden shift in perspective, there would be a swift and brutal response. They had to move quickly, gathering allies among rogues, forging a coalition strong enough to challenge the Beta's carefully woven web of influence. With the Alpha on their side, they had a chance, but they also needed to keep the Alpha safe from any direct coup. The Beta was cunning enough to attempt a quick power grab if he sensed the Alpha was slipping from his grasp. They made their way back to a secure hideout, mindful of the increased patrols. Adrenaline still coursed through her veins. She felt oddly light, almost breathless from the enormity of what had just transpired. After so many years of believing she had lost everything, that the Alpha thought her guilty, she had finally glimpsed a path to redemption. Yet along with that came a renewed sense of responsibility. This was no longer about solely clearing her name. It was about saving the pack from a threat that could destroy it from within. She did not care if they welcomed her as Luna again or not. She was determined to ensure the pack's future was not one of cruelty and darkness. The night passed slowly, neither she nor her companion finding any real rest. They slept in shifts, always on guard. Each time a branch snapped or a distant howl carried through the air, her heart lurched. But dawn arrived without incident. In the pale light, they discussed their next steps. Her companion agreed to head to a nearby neutral territory where they might find a small rogue band that had once been victim to the Beta's machinations. She would remain closer to Silver Crescent's borders, ready to maintain contact with the Alpha and the Elders. They set a rendezvous point for 3 nights hence, hoping that by then her companion would return with testimony the Alpha could use. She tried not to think of the countless ways the plan could go wrong. That day, she ventured out under the guise of collecting herbs, wearing a tattered cloak to mask her identity from any distant onlookers. She needed to keep busy, to feel useful, and to discreetly glean more information on the pack's internal tensions. Careful to stay hidden, she observed how the pack's daily life continued under a sheen of normalcy. She saw hunters returning with game, pups playing in a yard under a watchful caretaker's eye, and laborers repairing a wooden fence. On the surface, it looked like a community tending to its routines, but she spotted clusters of wolves whispering with hushed urgency, their eyes flicking around nervously. The trolls roamed constantly, exuding an air of suspicion. She overheard snippets of conversation suggesting that a rumor was spreading about a rogue spotted near the settlement. Some believed it was an advance scout for a rogue army, while others merely shrugged it off. As evening approached, she slipped back into the forest's cover. Her mind replayed the Alpha's expression at the farmhouse, the blend of regret, hope, and lingering pain. It was strange to realize that beneath all her fury at her unjust banishment, part of her still cared for him. She despised the heartbreak and the years stolen from her, but she could not completely extinguish the memory of the good they once shared. Perhaps she should not want to extinguish it. By acknowledging that glimmer of warmth, she felt strengthened in her resolve to protect the pack from falling prey to the Beta's ambitions. If the Alpha was still fighting to maintain some shred of moral decency within that territory, she would not let him do it alone. The days passed in a swirl of cautious meetings and secret planning. The Elder sent word through subtle signals that he had convinced 2 more council members to oppose the Beta openly if the Alpha demanded an investigation. The Alpha reached out again, this time through an intermediary, asking for more direct testimonies. He cautioned her to be careful, as the Beta seemed to be growing suspicious of unusual activity. In fact, a new wave of fear took hold when one of the Alpha's trusted subordinates was found wounded under mysterious circumstances. Whisper suggested the Beta was sending a message to anyone who stood in his way. Despite the looming danger, she pressed on, gathering statements from rogues who had been harassed or coerced by the Beta's forces in recent months. One harrowing account described how the Beta's cronies had threatened to harm a family unless they handed over valuable resources. Another spoke of orchestrated raids against smaller packs on the outskirts. Each story painted a portrait of ruthless ambition and manipulation, the Beta's power expanding with each calculated move. She compiled this evidence meticulously, then passed it along to the Alpha through carefully staged drop points in the forest. Though they never met face to face during that stretch of time, she could sense his outrage growing with each new piece of proof. When her companion finally returned, they discovered that the rogue band he sought had indeed been victims of the Beta's intimidation. They were hesitant to get involved, fearing retaliation if they testified. But, with some convincing, they agreed to provide statements, on the condition that the Alpha guaranteed their protection. She recognized the risk involved, but it also proved the Beta's corruption extended beyond the Pack's borders. If brought to light, it would be difficult for the Beta to defend his actions. Bolstered by these accounts, the Alpha set a date for a formal council meeting where the evidence would be presented. All the ranking council members, including the Beta, were required to attend. She sensed the magnitude of this confrontation. If it failed, if the Beta managed to twist the narrative yet again, it would likely seal her fate for good. But if it succeeded, justice might finally be served. In the final hours before the council meeting, a storm gathered on the horizon. Dark clouds rolled in, and thunder rumbled in the distance. It felt eerily reminiscent of the night she was banished. She recalled the swirl of ominous clouds overhead, nature itself seeming to protest her exile. Now, once again, the heavens seemed to mirror the turmoil within the Pack. She crouched on a rocky outcrop overlooking the Pack's main settlement. Lights glowed in the windows of the gathering hall, the place where the fate of the Pack would be decided. Her heart pounded, nerves frayed by the enormity of what was about to happen. She and her companion stayed at a safe distance, poised to rush in if needed. The Alpha had arranged for a small contingent of loyal guards who believed in his authority to be stationed nearby, ready to intervene should the Beta resort to violence. She could only imagine the tension inside the hall as the council members assembled, each bearing the weight of conflicting loyalties. The Alpha would present the evidence, stepping into direct confrontation with his second-in-command. She envisioned the Beta's reaction, the cunning grin twisting into fury, denial, or a manipulative retort. She prayed that the testimonies were solid enough to sway the majority. The wind whipped at her cloak, carrying the scent of rain. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the settlement in momentary brilliance. Soon, the storm would break. She could only wait, her muscles coiled with anticipation. Time stretched painfully, each minute seeming like an hour. Then, a sudden burst of raised voices echoed across the open space, carried on the wind. Her breath caught. The meeting must have erupted into confrontation. More shouts followed, though the thunder made it hard to discern words. She turned to her companion, who nodded grimly, readying himself for battle if it came to that. Their plan was to stay hidden unless they received the Alpha's signal, a specific howl that would indicate the need for reinforcement. Her nerves were wound so tight that every muscle in her body trembled, memories of her last appearance before the council swirling in her mind. This time, at least, she had truth on her side. Suddenly, a snarl cut through the air, followed by a deafening crash. A moment later, lightning split the sky, and rain began to fall in a torrential downpour. She sensed the confrontation spiraling out of control. Unable to remain idle, she crept closer, shielded by the darkness and the pounding rain. She approached the edge of the courtyard outside the hall, straining to listen. The door burst open, and two wolves stumbled out, locked in a furious struggle. Through the sheets of rain, she recognized one as the Alpha. The other, pushing against him with brute strength, was the Beta. Their eyes glowed with the intensity of partial shifts. A savage growl tore from the Beta's throat, and she felt her blood run cold. The Alpha growled back, challenging him. Amid the thunder, she heard fragments of what they were shouting. The Beta accused the Alpha of conspiring with a rogue Luna, labeling him a traitor to his own pack. The Alpha roared that the Beta's treachery had been exposed, his deals with criminals laid bare before the council. Lightning flashed again, revealing the contorted fury on the Beta's face. He lunged forward, and the Alpha responded in kind, their claws swiping through the storm-lashed air. From inside the hall, more wolves poured out, some leaping into the fray, others trying to pull them apart. A chaotic melee erupted in the courtyard. The elder who had aided her tried to rally the loyal council members, shouting for calm, but the storm and the clash of bodies drowned out his voice. She glimpsed younger wolves, uncertain who to follow, and older wolves attempting to restore order. In that pandemonium, she realized the pack's unity was teetering on a blade's edge. The Beta's loyalists lunged at the Alpha's supporters. Thunder crashed overhead, merging with the snarls and cries. For a moment, she froze, recalling the vow she had made. Never again would she watch her pack torn apart by deception. She stripped off her cloak, tucking it away from the mud. Her companion moved beside her, wordlessly acknowledging that this was the moment they had been preparing for. She could not stand by while the Alpha fought alone. With a sharp intake of breath, she shifted part way, letting her werewolf strength surge through her limbs. Then she plunged into the storm, determined to help reveal the truth and restore a fractured pack before it was too late. Wind whipped through the clearing as torrents of rain pelted the muddy ground, thunder resonating across the dark sky. In the stark flashes of lightning, the frenzied scene around the old meeting hall burst into sharp relief. Wolves in partial shifts tore at one another, some faithful to the Alpha who had sought to expose the great conspiracy, others blindly following the Beta who had spun lies and seized power through intimidation. In the midst of the clash, the former Luna emerged like a silent wraith, stepping out of the shadows and into the heart of the storm, her eyes fixed on the two figures locked in a vicious grapple. The Alpha she once stood beside, and the Beta who had orchestrated her downfall. She felt the weight of countless years of longing, betrayal, and injustice tangling in her heart, yet her resolve was steeled by her purpose. She would not cower in the darkness while her old pack, the one she had once devoted her life to protecting, was torn apart by a ruthless web of deceit. Clenching her fists, she shouted for the nearest wolves to halt, her voice cutting through the driving rain. Some turned to her, eyes wide with shock at the sight of the supposed rogue who had dared to reappear. A hushed ripple of disbelief spread through the smaller skirmishes, though the aggression did not wholly abate. Even so, just for an instant, her presence alone disrupted the furious rhythm of the battle. By a jagged spear of lightning, she caught sight of a battered elder, struggling against a pair of young wolves loyal to the Beta. Without hesitation, she dove into the fray. Her partially shifted claws flashed as she seized the arm of one attacker and twisted, forcing him to drop the elder. The second leaped at her, savage with fear and fury, but she deftly sidestepped, sweeping his legs out from under him with a fluid motion. The rain-slick ground aided her momentum. He crashed down, splattering mud in every direction. The elder stumbled away, panting. In his eyes shone a momentary spark of recognition and gratitude. Despite the frantic chaos, she felt a flicker of hope that some in the pack might welcome her intervention if only they could see the full truth. Snarls drew her attention to where the Alpha and Beta still grappled. Their fists collided with brutal force, and she saw the Alpha's head snap back, blood trailing from a cut above his brow. The Beta bared his teeth, pressing his advantage, an unhinged gleam in his eyes that confirmed what she had long suspected. For him, this was not just a battle for survival, but for control and power. A circle of onlookers formed, some uncertain of whom to help, others shouting encouragement or cursing in the rain. Lightning flared again, revealing the desperation etched on the Alpha's face. He might have held authority in name, but the Beta's manipulation had corroded the pack's unity. Now, with her evidence brought forward, the Beta was cornered, and rather than surrendering to a fair trial, he chose violence. She recognized that she could not stand idly by. With careful, determined steps, she moved closer to the two battling figures. Her hair clung to her face, rivulets of water streaming down her cheekbones as thunder rattled overhead. She felt a surge of primal energy welling within her, the old bond she once had with these lands stirring in her blood. She had been the pack's Luna, bound to protect them in times of crisis. Even though they had cast her out, she could not deny the familiarity of that role thrumming through her. One glance at the Alpha's pained expression, and she knew the moment for indecision had passed. But before she could intervene directly, a young wolf lunged into her path, eyes burning with hatred. She felt the splash of mud as he closed in. "Traitor," he hissed, voice trembling with either anger or confusion. He had barely been out of adolescence when she was banished. Now he stood as a weapon for the Beta's cause, intoxicated by false stories of her betrayal. Her heart twisted. She did not want to harm a wolf who might only be misguided. "I was never your enemy," she pleaded, trying to hold her ground without attacking. Another flash of lightning revealed uncertainty flickering in his face. Yet he remained tense, one hand partially shifted into claws. Around them, other scuffles ebbed and flowed. It was as if the entire pack hovered on the brink of collapse, waiting for one decisive moment. She spoke again, her voice raw but steady, fighting to be heard over the roaring wind. "You have been told lies. Look at what she gestured toward the Beta, "is doing to your Alpha. Look at what your pack is doing to itself." She felt the young wolf's conflict. He glanced toward the center of the courtyard, where the Alpha's supporters struggled against the Beta's loyalists, where the Alpha himself was battered and bleeding. Rain blurred the edges of everything, but it could not mask the truth any longer. She took a tentative step back to show she would not strike him first. The young wolf's stance wavered. Then, with a ragged exhale, he dropped his guard and turned away, leaving her path clear. Without a moment's hesitation, she surged forward. The ring of watching wolves parted in confusion as she neared the Alpha and the Beta. The Alpha, breathing hard, spotted her. Surprise lit his gaze, mingling with a flicker of what might have been relief. The Beta, however, snarled in fury, and she could see the madness in his eyes intensify when he recognized her. The rogue he had worked so hard to frame. Rage twisted his features. Lightning illuminated the feral gleam on his face, the reflection of a cornered manipulator who saw no way out except through raw violence. She planted her feet in the slick mud, raising her voice to address the onlookers. "All of you, listen," she shouted, trying to project her words above the hammering thunder. "You have heard the testimonies, the evidence your Alpha presented tonight, the new alliances, the threats, the paid mercenaries on our borders. These are not illusions. The Beta has traded your honor for power, and he has tried to keep you silent with fear. Look around. Look at what your pack has become under his schemes." She could hardly believe the composure in her own voice, born out of years of pent-up frustration and heartbreak. The Beta sneered, lunging at her. Even though part of her wanted to rely on her old bond to diffuse the tension, she knew she had no choice but to defend herself. She sidestepped, letting his fist graze her ribs, the impact sending a dull ache through her side. At once, she retaliated, swinging her arm up in a controlled strike that connected with his shoulder, forcing him to stagger. The Alpha took that moment to catch his breath, clasping his bleeding brow, his eyes still locked on the Beta. Pain and sorrow lined his expression, yet a fierce determination also burned there. From the corners of the courtyard, more wolves approached, drawn by the confrontation's magnitude. She recognized some older faces, council members who had once respected her. Their gazes flickered between the wounded Alpha, the rampaging Beta, and the woman they had exiled years ago. Doubt rippled among them. Even those who had never truly believed she was a traitor now struggled to reconcile her presence. Yet the hush of uncertainty grew, for her words and the Alpha's recent revelations had seeped into their minds, and many began to question the Beta's motives more openly. Rain continued to pound the earth, turning the courtyard into a morass of slick ground and swirling puddles. Lightning strobed through the clouds, and with each flash, the image of the battle burned itself deeper into her mind. The Alpha took a halting step toward the Beta, his voice resonating with a quiet, furious clarity. "I have been deceived for too long. You manipulated the entire pack, seized on my doubts, and played on our fears. No more." His voice rose, cutting through the wind. "This pack deserves better. We will not be slaves to your ambition." The Beta let out a harsh laugh, though the edges of panic showed on his face. "So you put your faith in her again? The very wolf you banished for treason?" The pack saw the evidence of her guilt that night. He cast a wild glare around, seeking any shred of support. "She is a liar, come to tear us apart." "This pack was tearing itself apart," she interjected, stepping forward, eyes locked on the Beta. "All I did was bring the truth that should have been brought to light years ago." She refused to let him twist her words. "I endured every trial you forced upon me, collecting proof of your deals in the shadows. You can try to hide behind old lies, but the evidence is already spread among the council. It will not vanish just because you shout over it." A flash of memory struck her then, the echo of the Alpha's decree all those years ago, banishing her under a moonlit sky, flanked by council members who looked at her with contempt. Tonight, she stood on the same ground, battered by wind and rain, but no longer powerless. She had the truth on her side, as well as her own unbroken resolve. Fueled by that determination, she and the Alpha launched a coordinated assault on the Beta, forcing him backward. The thunder boomed, and the crowd of onlookers parted to create space. She felt the Alpha's presence at her side. Though the sting of betrayal still lingered, something in his posture conveyed an apology and a willingness to stand with her now. The Beta blocked their strikes, but he was clearly outmatched when they worked in tandem. Behind them, some of the Beta's loyalists attempted to surge forward, but the Alpha's supporters and newly emboldened council members intercepted them. The tide of the conflict shifted, fracturing the once formidable support the Beta had relied upon. Through ragged breaths, the Alpha addressed the pack at large. "If any among you doubt what we say, speak now. The council has seen the documents, the testimonies, the direct confessions of those the Beta manipulated. I am willing to stand before any tribunal to account for my part in this, but I will not watch our home fall prey to corruption while I remain Alpha." Even in the roar of the storm, his voice carried a note of sincerity that could not be dismissed. Many wolves who had wavered earlier lowered their heads, acknowledging the Alpha's genuine remorse. Others shouted in support, demanding the Beta face justice. No such sentiment stirred in the Beta's eyes. He let out a guttural snarl, launching a renewed series of vicious strikes. Claws extended, he raked at the Alpha's arm, drawing blood. The Alpha hissed in pain, staggering, but did not retreat. She darted in with a sidelong blow, aiming for the Beta's side. He twisted to avoid the worst of it, but her claws found enough purchase to rip his shirt, leaving a gash that rapidly reddened with blood. Lightning streaked above, illuminating the raw fury in the Beta's expression as he recognized that the fight was slipping from his control. The pack was no longer blindly in his thrall. He was alone in his desperation, pinned down by the truth and the Luna he had once sought to destroy. She heard frightened voices, snarls, and pleas from the wolves around them. Some tried to break free of minor scuffles to gather around the main confrontation. Despite the mayhem, a sense of clarity spread through the courtyard, as if the downfall of the beta's lies was becoming an inevitability. Thunder rumbled once more, and she felt a rush of adrenaline as she leaped forward, catching the beta off balance. Her knee slammed into his midsection, and the alpha capitalized on his stagger to deliver a powerful strike that sent him sprawling onto his back. Mud splashed into the air, and the beta gasped, struggling to rise. In the flickering torchlight that mixed with the lightning overhead, she and the alpha stood over him, panting. Rain had plastered hair to their foreheads, blood smeared across their arms. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the slosh of water and the ragged breathing of all those present. The thunder rolled away, leaving the heavy patter of rain and the crackle of distant lightning as the only backdrop. The alpha dropped to one knee, pinning the beta's arms with his hands. "You will face the council for your crimes," he growled, voice raw and resolute. The beta spat mud and cursed, hurling insults at both of them. But his struggles were weakening, defeat etched into the lines of his face. He glanced around, searching for any loyalist who might rescue him, only to find the handful who had once sworn allegiance to him standing in uneasy clusters, heads lowered, glancing at the evidence of his treachery. The illusions he had spun were gone. Another roll of thunder reverberated, and with a trembling fury, he hissed, "This is not over. You cannot just undo all those years with one dramatic scene." "You are correct," the alpha replied. "We cannot undo what is done. But your stranglehold on this pack ends here." With a decisive motion, the alpha called for 2 senior wolves to come forward, each grim-faced yet relieved that the turmoil might finally be nearing its end. They bound the beta's arms, ensuring he could not slip away in the chaos, then dragged him toward the meeting hall, ignoring his foul protests. She stepped back, her muscles quivering from the tension of the fight. Mud coated her legs, and blood trickled from a shallow cut on her forearm. The alpha rose shakily, turning to meet her gaze. A hush settled over them as the rain finally began to ease, the clouds dispersing slowly, revealing the faint shimmer of moonlight. Around them, pack members stared in disbelief, some in admiration, others in lingering doubt. She wondered which of them might ever fully trust her again. Nonetheless, she held her head high, refusing to shrink beneath their scrutiny. The alpha drew a slow, unsteady breath and let his gaze roam across the courtyard. Wolves began to regroup, either tending to the injured or gathering in silent clusters. A few, especially the older ones, offered solemn bows of respect toward her. An unspoken acknowledgement passed through them, a recognition of her tireless mission to reveal the beta's scheming. She felt a tightness in her chest, uncertain how to respond. She had not come for praise. She had come to ensure justice, even if that meant confronting the very people who once cast her out. Shaking off the lingering tremors of adrenaline, she murmured to the alpha, "We need to help those who are hurt. We can handle the rest later." She saw him nod, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over his features. He gestured for several of the uninjured wolves to gather the wounded. Over by a toppled barrel, she spotted one of the elders, the same who had first agreed to help her, clutching a bruised shoulder. She hurried to his side, kneeling in the mud to inspect his injury. Though she was not carrying the extensive medical kit she once relied upon as Luna, she still possessed some knowledge of herbal healing. With careful touches, she made sure his shoulder was not dislocated, murmuring a soft reassurance. Despite his obvious pain, the elder managed a wan smile. "We have waited a long time for the truth," he whispered. She glanced away, emotions tangling in her chest. "I never wanted it to come to this," she replied quietly, thinking of all the shattered bonds and the blood-streaked courtyard. In the distance, she heard the Alpha issuing commands, telling the council members to organize an immediate hearing. The remains of the storm roiled overhead, but the worst had passed, leaving the night air charged with a sense of somber relief. A wave of dizziness caught her off guard, and she realized she had barely eaten or slept in days, her body running on stubborn determination. Drained, she helped the elder to his feet. Then she spotted her companion weaving through the thinning crowd, scanning for her with worried eyes. Relief softened his tense posture when he noticed her. She offered a small nod to show she was unharmed. Even with the beta subdued, an uneasy feeling churned in her stomach. The pack was safe from immediate violence, but the deeper wounds would not heal overnight. The Alpha's voice rang out again, now steadier. "Everyone, return to the meeting hall if you can. We will see this matter concluded without further bloodshed." Rain dripped from the eaves of the hall, creating a steady patter on the wooden threshold. Torches smoldered, their flames hissing in the wet air. Slowly, the pack filed inside, a battered collection of wolves longing for closure. Some glared suspiciously at her. A few dared to meet her gaze with remorseful curiosity. Others remained focused on the Alpha, as though uncertain whether to trust his sudden revelation or cling to the illusions the Beta had instilled. She lingered momentarily, letting the group pass by. The battered courtyard was strewn with fallen logs, overturned crates, and scattered weapons. Trails of blood and muddy footprints told a grim story of the conflict that had erupted. She shut her eyes for a heartbeat, recalling how different this courtyard had looked in the old days, filled with joyous celebrations, with pups racing around tables laden with food, with laughter echoing under starry skies. The memory flickered painfully, and she inhaled sharply, trying to ground herself. The past could never be fully reclaimed, but perhaps a better future could yet be built on the ashes of this cruel betrayal. Her companion touched her shoulder gently. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded, pressing her lips together. She was exhausted, yes, but also relieved. The day she had spent years envisioning, her return to unmask the true villain, was unfolding before her eyes. Yet she felt conflicted, uncertain whether to feel satisfaction or grief for all that had been lost along the way. They entered the meeting hall in silence. The interior was dimly lit, torchlight reflecting off wooden beams that rose high into the ceiling. A hush cloaked the space, broken only by the occasional scrape of a chair or the subdued moan of someone cradling an injury. The Beta was held fast by two senior wolves, his arms bound behind his back. Nearby, the Alpha stood, flanked by several council members. Some of the pack's younger members huddled at the periphery, wearing anxious expressions. Scattered among the chairs, older wolves looked on with haunted eyes, as though hoping to see justice carried out after years of confusion and fear. She remained by the hall's entrance. A quiet tension gripped her chest, remembering the last time she had stood before these very seats, when the council had deemed her guilty of a crime she did not commit. Ghosts of that final night whispered in the rafters, and she exhaled slowly, refusing to let them drown her now. She glanced at the Alpha, and he briefly met her gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. This hearing would be different. The Alpha stepped forward, raising a hand for attention. "This pack has been deceived," he began, his voice echoing in the hushed hall. "You have seen part of the evidence, but even the testimonies alone should be enough to bring the truth to light. The Beta has orchestrated underhanded dealings with outside forces, endangered our alliances, and committed offenses that violate our most sacred laws. The false proof he planted against our former Luna drove her into exile, fracturing our pack in ways we never fully understood. Tonight, we correct that mistake, and we begin the process of making amends. Though flickers of uncertainty passed through the crowd, no one dared to speak out in the beta's defense. The alpha gestured for her to approach, and she complied slowly, feeling every gaze settle on her as she moved. Beneath the torchlight, she could see rivulets of water sliding down her arms, mixing with streaks of mud and blood. Despite her bedraggled appearance, she stood upright, unwavering, her chin held high. In a subdued voice, the alpha continued, "You all know the story we were told, that she conspired to claim power. But consider the events that followed. Our pack's policies shifted. New alliances formed under suspicious circumstances. Border raids began against smaller, weaker groups, and the beta's sphere of influence grew each time we turned a blind eye." He looked directly at the bound wolf, voice growing in intensity. "This is not the legacy our ancestors meant for us, nor is it the reality this pack deserves. I accepted those lies out of weakness and fear. For that, I take responsibility." His admission sent ripples of shock through the assembled wolves. Some cast guilty glances at her, recalling their complicity in her banishment. Others appeared stunned, as if they had not expected the alpha to shoulder blame so openly. She swallowed hard, her mind whirling with the enormity of what was happening. For years she had imagined this moment, rehearsing how she would handle it. Now that it was here, she found herself fighting a surge of conflicting emotions: relief, anger, vindication, sorrow, and a fragile hope. One of the elders, the same who had helped her in secret, stepped forward from the crowd. He cleared his throat, casting a purposeful look around. "We have all seen glimpses of the beta's methods, but we were too afraid to question them. Even I," his voice cracked with regret, "I am ashamed to say I did not speak out soon enough. If I had, perhaps the pack could have avoided years of hardship. Let us not make that mistake again. We have the proof in hand, and we have heard accounts from those the beta extorted. This is more than enough to charge him with conspiracy and treason against the Silver Crescent pack." A low murmur spread through the onlookers. Several council members nodded their agreement. Across the hall, the beta snarled, veins standing out on his neck, but he could not break free. He spat. "You will regret this, all of you. There is an outside force that will come for me. They will not forget the deals I made, the promises offered, and when they come, this pathetic pack will fall." His eyes burned with malevolence, daring the alpha to refute him. The alpha's face hardened. "Then we will stand against them if we must, cleansed of your corruption. We will not cower behind lies anymore." A hush fell over the crowd as he motioned for the two wolves restraining the beta to remove him from the main hall and place him under guarded lock and key until the formal trial could convene. The beta struggled, hurling curses, but the elders would hear none of it. With grim resolve, they escorted him out, shutting the doors behind them. In the ensuing stillness, all eyes returned to the alpha and the woman who had once served as Luna. She braced herself for a wave of uncertain questions, perhaps even accusations. Instead, a deep, profound silence hung in the air, as though no one knew exactly what to say. Finally, it was the alpha who broke the silence, his voice subdued. "You risked your life to bring us the truth," he said, addressing her directly. "Had you not returned, this pack might have succumbed entirely to his influence. We owe you more than an apology. Though that is where I must start. I failed you. I failed the pack by banishing you instead of searching for the truth. Please tell us what you would have us do to make amends." Her breath caught in her throat. She had spent so long imagining confrontations that ended in rage or vindication, she never once truly believed he would lay his pride down so humbly. A knot of emotion tightened in her chest, and she closed her eyes for a beat to gather her thoughts. The crowd waited, a sea of exhausted, wary faces. When she opened her eyes again, she spoke with as much calm as she could muster. "I did not do this to be praised. I did it because your pack, our pack, deserved the truth. So many were harmed by these lies. From neighboring territories to the youngest members here, innocents paid the price for my exile. The only way to set this right is to see the beta held fully accountable, to restore fair governance in this territory, and to ensure no one else suffers from false accusations." A murmur of agreement spread, though some members cast uneasy glances at her. She knew many old resentments would not fade instantly. She also recognized that some might question her intentions, suspecting she would demand to reclaim the role of Luna by force or stand in judgment over them all. Weary, she brushed the drenched strands of hair from her face. She had no illusions that acceptance would come quickly. The Alpha, however, lowered his gaze, guilt evident in every line of his posture. "That is only just," he conceded. "But what about you? The Council will want to know if you wish to reinstate your old place among us. You earned it once through service and compassion, and despite everything, many would stand by you if you sought it again." Silence tightened around them, as though the entire room held its breath for her answer. She remembered the old days, the sense of belonging she felt when she guided the pack with a gentle hand. She recalled the heartbreak of betrayal on the night she was cast out and the harsh years wandering as a rogue. Could she truly go back to that role? She turned her gaze to her companion, who stood by the doorway, watching quietly. He had become her ally in the wild, someone who knew the ferocity of survival outside these walls. Would she abandon that life, now that justice was finally in reach? With a measured breath, she turned back to face the Alpha. "I am not sure it would be wise to step back into that role immediately," she confessed. "The wounds here run deep. Trust cannot be rebuilt in a single night, and I would never force myself upon a pack that still fears me or feels uncertain. There is enough upheaval already. First, we must see the beta brought to trial, the outside threats addressed, and the pack's stability re-established. If, after all that, the pack still wishes me to serve as its Luna, we can discuss it then. But until that day, my place is simply to help you heal and protect those who cannot protect themselves." A faint sigh of relief rustled through some of the gathering. It was as though they feared she might demand immediate power, inciting more conflict at a time when they were all weary. Yet her answer was measured, bridging the gap between their need for leadership and her own complicated history. The Alpha nodded solemnly, gratitude shining in his gaze. "We will do this together," he said, voice low but resolute. "For now, let us treat the wounded, secure our defenses against the allies the beta threatened us with, and bring forth the official charges against him. Then, in due time, we will see whether you wish to remain among us." Her chest tightened at the implication. Remain among us. After all these years of exile, the notion of being invited, even tentatively, to stay felt surreal. She merely inclined her head, not trusting her voice to speak again without breaking. The Alpha turned to the council members, instructing them to gather detailed evidence for a formal hearing. He tasked others with strengthening border patrols against the potential incursion the beta had threatened. Then, with a final flicker of torchlight across the hall, he signaled that the meeting was adjourned. exhausted wolves began to file out. A few approached her in passing, some wordlessly nodding in cautious respect, others offering hushed apologies. Many hung back, unsure how to reconcile their old beliefs with this new reality. She accepted each reaction quietly, understanding that her reintroduction to the pack would be anything but simple. When nearly everyone had left, only she, her companion, the Alpha, and a few loyal elders remained within the hall. A crackle of energy still clung to the air, remnants of the storm lingering in the flickering torches. Mud tracked across the floors, testament to how quickly the entire pack had been hauled into chaos. The Alpha stood near her, saying nothing for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the battered wooden floor. Rain dripped steadily from his hair, blood crusted on his brow. Finally, he spoke in a hushed tone, so the others could scarcely hear. "I need you to know something," he said, voice hollow yet earnest. "When I sentenced you, part of me believed it had to be a mistake. Everything I knew about you conflicted with the so-called evidence, but I could not risk defying what appeared to be proof, especially when the Beta used the Council's fears to demand swift justice. The guilt has haunted me ever since." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "I will spend the rest of my life atoning for that error." She felt a tremor run through her, recalling the dreadful night of her banishment, when his voice resounded across the clearing. At the time, she thought him heartless, wholly convinced of her guilt. Hearing now that he had doubted it, that he had shouldered guilt, she was not sure if it made the wound sting more or less. She swallowed, 1,000 unspoken words tangling on her tongue. "Eventually," she managed, "it is enough that you see the truth now. Make sure no one else is harmed by similar lies. That is how you can atone." She added after a beat, "And I will try to forgive you, in time." A flicker of relief passed across the Alpha's features. His shoulders sagged as though a great weight had been lifted, even if only slightly. They stood in the echoing hall, the night heavy with the aftermath of violence, yet also shimmering with a fragile new possibility. In her mind's eye, she saw the battered courtyard, the wounded wolves, the broken trust. It would take more than a single victory to mend all that was broken. But she clung to the faint glimmer of optimism that, at last, the lies had been shattered. Dawn arrived with surprising gentleness, painting the horizon with a wash of pale gold, the air damp but calm after the night's tempest. The storm's aftertaste lingered in the wind, carrying away the acrid scent of fear that had clung to the pack's territory. In the earliest rays of morning, a subdued energy flowed through the Silver Crescent settlement, as though everyone recognized the significance of the day to come. The battered meeting hall, still strewn with muddy footprints and streaks of dried blood, prepared to serve as the site where the pack's future would be decided. Word spread swiftly through the territory. The trial of the Beta would begin at sunrise. Council members who had once ruled in relative harmony until the night of her banishment now stood in tense anticipation, collecting every scrap of evidence and testimony. Outside, wolves gathered in small, wary groups, most bleary-eyed from the lack of sleep, but determined to witness the outcome. Despite the gravity of the occasion, there was a collective undercurrent of relief that came from finally facing the truth rather than living under the Beta's manipulative shadow. She awoke in a small, disused chamber at the edge of the main lodge, where an elder had insisted she rest. The wooden walls smelled faintly of smoke and cedar, and the single window overlooked a cluster of pine trees swaying in the breeze. Her eyes felt heavy, her limbs sore from the night's conflict. She rose slowly, wincing at the bruises she had collected. Though part of her wanted to remain hidden, part of her recognized that she had a role to play in the day's proceedings. This was what she had sacrificed so much for, the chance to set the record straight, to bring justice not just for herself, but for every wolf harmed by the beta's schemes. Her companion awaited her outside, leaning against a rough wooden post. He offered a nod. "They are getting ready for the trial. Are you sure you want to be present?" "Yes," she replied, the taste of uncertainty on her tongue. "I need to see this through. Otherwise the lies might linger, and I owe it to the pack to stand by the evidence I brought." He studied her with concern. "Then I will stand with you. But be aware that tensions may still be high. Some will not forgive so easily, and others may question your motives." "I know," she said quietly. "But that cannot stop me now." Together, they made their way toward the large clearing in front of the meeting hall. The morning sun cut through the lingering dampness, illuminating the battered courtyard where the fight had taken place. Signs of the night's violence were still visible. Broken fence posts, trampled grasses, splintered crates. She tried not to dwell on the memories of that storm-drenched battle, instead focusing on the throng of wolves assembling under the brightening sky. At the forefront stood the Alpha, flanked by the elders and a handful of younger wolves who had clearly decided to pledge their loyalty to him now that the beta's lies were exposed. Among them, she noticed anxious glances, hesitant greetings, but also glimpses of respect. The Alpha met her gaze as she approached. His injuries from the brawl were freshly bandaged, though bruises mottled his arms and face. He did not speak, but a slight incline of his head signaled his acknowledgement. She inclined her head in return, standing on the outskirts of the central group, neither demanding a place at the Alpha's side, nor slinking away in shame. The last stragglers arrived, forming a wide semicircle. In the middle, a tall elder, known for his impartial wisdom, raised his hands to command silence. His gaze swept across the assembled wolves, lingering on the many who bore cuts and bruises from the night's melee. "We gather today to confront the treachery that has nearly sundered our pack," he began, voice carrying a steady authority that quieted the murmuring crowd. "The beta stands accused of conspiracy, violence, and deceit, culminating in the framing of our former Luna. The evidence, compiled from documents, testimonies, and the suspicious actions he orchestrated, will be presented. Each council member shall have the chance to weigh it. If the charges stand, he will face the consequences under our pack's law." A soft ripple of reaction passed through the onlookers. Some nodded in grim agreement, while others remained stoic, waiting to see what the formal process would reveal. At a signal from the elder, 2 guards led the beta into the clearing, his wrists bound, his face etched with defiance and lingering fury. Whispers of revulsion spread, and a handful of wolves bared their teeth at the sight of him, recalling the wounds he had inflicted, both physical and emotional. The elder continued, "We will first hear from those who have direct evidence of the beta's involvement in clandestine activities. Then the council will question him, followed by any concluding statements." He turned to the Alpha. "You may speak on behalf of the charges." The Alpha stood straight, shoulders tensing beneath the weight of the moment. "Last night, I presented to the council a collection of documents that prove the beta's coordination with outside mercenaries. Those mercenaries admitted to attacking rogue groups at his behest, pressuring smaller packs, and funneling resources back to him in exchange for favorable territory concessions. Furthermore, hidden logs from the pack's archives show falsified records that contributed to the fabricated evidence against our former Luna. These records were maintained or altered under the beta's orders. Several council members, including our elders, have reviewed them." One by one, council members stepped forward to confirm what they had seen, referencing the documents and explaining how the details aligned with suspicious events of the past few years: raids along the borders, sudden rises in trade of stolen goods, intimidations of weaker packs. An uneasy stillness hung over the crowd, for many had known the beta as a charismatic wolf who promised growth and prosperity. Now, they saw the other side of that coin, the quiet corruption that had spread like a poison through their ranks, fueled by fear. Then came the testimonies. Rogues, once cast aside and scorned, were called forward to recount encounters with the beta's enforcers. Their voices trembled as they described being cornered, threatened, and sometimes attacked unless they complied with the beta's demands. These outcasts spoke of black market trade, smuggled weapons, and forced espionage. When confronted with these harsh realities, the beta remained coldly silent, occasionally sneering at the testifiers. But each confession painted a more damning picture, and the crowd bristled with anger, many realizing how thoroughly they had been manipulated. Finally, the elder signaled for the former Luna to step forward. The hush that fell was palpable. She took a measured breath, stepping into the open space, feeling the pressure of countless stares. Though her heart fluttered with anxiety, she kept her voice calm and level as she recounted her story. She began with the night of her banishment, describing how the so-called evidence had been placed to implicate her in a plot against the Alpha. She spoke of her years in exile, how she fought to survive while gathering information on the real traitor. She detailed the coded messages she discovered, the cross-referencing she performed to link the beta to the outside mercenaries. Each sentence was precise, methodical, because she knew any misstep could cast doubt on her credibility. She did not try to hide her anger or the suffering she endured, yet she refrained from dramatics. Her tone remained steady, and she concluded with a quiet resolution. "I have no desire to see further harm come to this pack. I was once your Luna, and though you cast me aside, my goal has never been revenge, but justice. This is the evidence I present. May you judge it honestly, so that the truth can finally be known." As she finished, a profound silence enveloped the clearing. The steady morning sun bathed the crowd in warm light, a sharp contrast to the cold reality of her words. At length, the elder turned to the beta, who stood with a rigid spine and a sneer curling his lip. "You have heard the charges and the evidence. Speak now, if you have any defense." The beta lifted his chin, casting a withering glare around. "You are all fools," he snarled, voice dripping with contempt. "I sought only to strengthen this pack, to ensure we would no longer languish in old traditions that made us weak. Yes, I made alliances with groups you call mercenaries, but it was to protect us from potential threats that you ignored. We gained more territory, more resources. As for the accusations regarding the former Luna, I will not deny that I seized the opportunity to remove her. She was an obstacle, a naive figure, too soft to lead us into real power. I manipulated her banishment because she stood in my way. But do not pretend you have not benefited from some of what I accomplished. The pack is stronger now, far from the archaic ways we once clung to." His words unleashed a tumult of reaction. Some wolves growled at his arrogance, while others turned pale with shame, realizing they had unwittingly reaped the rewards of his treachery. The Alpha's voice cracked like a lash in response. "Strength built on lies and cruelty is no true strength at all. We do not stand for tyranny, for blackmail, or for harming innocents to gain an advantage. That is not the legacy we uphold. You twisted our pack's pride and turned it into a weapon of oppression." "Enough." The elder nodded gravely. "You have admitted to key charges, and you have shown no remorse for the suffering you caused. Under our laws, such treasonous acts merit the severest punishments. However, it is the council's place to decide the exact course. He gestured to the council members, who formed a small huddle, discussing in low tones. Though they spoke quietly, tension radiated from their circle. The entire pack waited, breath bated, as the discussion stretched on for several minutes. Some of the younger wolves paced anxiously, while older members wiped sweat from their brows. The beta stood unmoving, defiance etched into every rigid muscle. At last, the council emerged from its conference. One of the senior elders, a stoic female with silver-streaked hair, stepped forward. She addressed the crowd, her words carefully measured. The council finds the beta guilty of high treason, conspiracy, and collusion with outside forces at the expense of our pack's honor and safety. For these crimes, he is to be held in confinement until a final council session determines whether he will face exile, or a harsher sentence if it is deemed necessary to protect us from his continued threat. She paused, her gaze sweeping the assembled wolves. Until that judgment is carried out, he is stripped of all rank and authority. Let him stand as an example that no one, no matter their position, is above our laws or our honor. A collective exhale rippled through the clearing, as if an immense burden had finally lifted. Wolves turned to one another, some with relief, others grappling with a mix of shame and newfound clarity. Several of the younger wolves who had followed the beta looked stricken, realizing how thoroughly they had been fooled. The alpha nodded somberly, seeming to accept that this was the best the council could do for now. By the time 2 sentries dragged the beta away, his angry shouts had lost their power, overshadowed by the firm resolve of a pack that was done with his machinations. Silence lingered for a long moment after his departure. Then, as though stirred by a collective sense of relief and uncertainty, the crowd began to disperse into smaller clusters, speaking in hushed voices about how to rebuild, how to atone for past mistakes, and how to reconcile with the wolves who had been harmed. A few approached the alpha, quietly offering their support. Others drifted toward her, clearly unsure how to address the woman they had once revered as Luna, then reviled as a traitor. She braced herself, uncertain what to expect. The first to reach her side was an older wolf she recognized as the one who had taught the pack's younger members the art of stealth. He bowed his head, voice trembling with guilt. "I was so quick to believe the beta's accusations back then. I was afraid. You deserved better than what we did to you." She swallowed a knot of emotion. It was fear that corrupted us all, not just one wolf's ambition. "I accept your apology." She pressed a hand gently to his arm, feeling the tension there, and offered a small smile. "What matters is that you have seen the truth and are willing to move forward with honesty." Others came forward, some speaking words of regret, others simply nodding or grasping her hand in silent acknowledgement. As more voices joined, she felt a mix of relief and heartbreak. For each step of reconciliation, there was a reminder of how her life had been torn apart, how many years had been consumed by exile and survival. Yet amidst the echoes of sorrow, hope began to bloom. There was a chance, now, for the pack to become stronger in a way that truly mattered, united not by fear, but by mutual respect and shared healing. Eventually, the alpha approached, waiting until the throng of well-wishers had thinned. His eyes, though weary, held a gentler light than she had seen in a very long time. The sun had climbed higher, bathing him in a warm glow that accentuated the lingering bruises on his face, a testament to the brutal battles fought the night before. He stood before her, clearly uncertain how to bridge the chasm that remained between them. Yet the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable when he spoke. "Thank you. Not just for coming back, but for staying to see this through. I know you had every reason to walk away once the evidence was revealed." That you chose to fight for this pack says more than any of us deserve." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the muddy ground between them. Images flitted through her mind. The sorrow of her banishment, the nights spent huddled in caves, the endless search for proof. She thought of the bruises on her arms, the scars left by rogues and mercenaries, and the heartbreak of knowing the Alpha had cast her out so easily. Yet at the same time, she recalled his willingness to step up last night, to shield her from the patrol, to vow to atone for his mistakes. "It is still my pack in a way," she finally said, her voice faltering. "No matter the exile, that bond never truly broke inside me. It is why I could not stay away." He nodded, understanding flickering in his expression. Then, in a lower tone, he asked the question that hung in the air. "Will you stay? If not as Luna, then at least as part of the pack. You said we need time to heal, and that is true, but we also need a guiding presence. I am not sure I deserve to ask you to provide it, but I cannot ignore the difference you have made with your insight. This place is your home as much as it is mine, if you still want it to be." The question punctured a barrier in her heart, stirring memories of what had once been a hopeful partnership between them. She recalled the nights they had spent discussing the future of the pack, of forging alliances built on respect, of fostering a safe environment for the young. Now, all those dreams seemed battered, marred by the lies that had driven her out. Yet the chance to reclaim them, or perhaps create something entirely new, gleamed like a fragile promise. She exhaled softly, letting a tentative warmth settle in her chest. "I will not pretend everything can go back to how it was," she said carefully. "But I will stay for now, to help rebuild what the beta nearly destroyed. As for reclaiming the title of Luna, we will have to see if the pack, and I, am ever ready for that." A trace of relief lit the Alpha's features. "That is enough," he murmured. "I am sure the rest will become clearer with time." Word of their exchange spread quickly. While some pack members still eyed her with caution, many welcomed the idea that she would remain. The Alpha convened a smaller meeting with key council members to outline immediate priorities, fortifying borders, healing internal divisions, and ensuring the Beta's allies outside the territory would not strike back. She attended that gathering as a consultant of sorts, offering her knowledge of the rogue networks. Her companion too joined these talks, bridging the gap between the pack's perspective and that of the outcasts who roamed the wilds. The elders, once skeptical, began to see the value of forging alliances built on transparency, acknowledging that not all rogues were threats. Indeed, some had been forced into that life by injustice similar to her own. In the days that followed, the settlement transformed from a place of tension to one of cautious reconstruction. Patrols were reorganized to uphold fair standards, not to intimidate. Trade with neighboring packs was reassessed, with an emphasis on respect and mutual benefit. Council meetings were opened to more voices, including younger wolves, to ensure no single individual could seize power unchecked. Though many difficulties remained, each step brought the Silver Crescent Pack a little closer to the unity and honor they had once cherished. Throughout this process, she found herself living in a small cabin near the forest's edge, close enough to stay connected, but far enough to grant space for those who still harbored doubts. During the day, she worked alongside the healers, tending to injuries that lingered from the conflicts. In the evenings, she sparred with guards eager to refine their skills without resorting to the Beta's merciless methods. To her surprise, some of the very wolves who had once condemned her approached her with curiosity, eager to learn from her broader experience in the rogue territories. Gradually the tension eased, replaced by an emerging acceptance that perhaps she was not the villain they had been led to believe. Still, the path of healing was not smooth. She frequently woke at night, haunted by vivid dreams of her banishment, the ring of accusing eyes, and the Alpha's condemning voice. Some days, the bitterness resurged, especially when she encountered the same council members who had insisted on her exile. On those days, she retreated into the forest, walking for hours among tall pines and whispering streams, collecting her thoughts and reminding herself why she had chosen to return. To protect those who could not protect themselves, to ensure no future Luna was cast out by a cunning conspirator, and to give her old home a second chance at the unity she once cherished. The Alpha, for his part, strove to atone. He often sought her out to consult on changes within the pack, ensuring she felt included in decisions that affected them all, yet never pressuring her to assume old responsibilities. He spent time with the younger wolves, discouraging fear-driven thinking and encouraging them to value open dialogue. At times, he asked her to accompany him on patrols or visits to neighboring packs, hoping her insight would guide them. She sensed genuine remorse and a desire to prove he had learned from his mistakes. Slowly, they began to rebuild a semblance of the trust they once shared, though she made it clear that trust could not be repaired overnight. She needed to see his integrity in action, day after day. Weeks turned into a cycle of subtle healing and cautious renewal. The fervor of the Beta's trial faded into the background, though he remained under watchful guard. Rumors circulated that the outside forces he had courted were sizing up the pack, uncertain whether to intervene in his favor. The Alpha prepared defensive strategies, encouraging the entire pack to stand firm, but he made it equally clear that no deals would be struck with those who thrived on cruelty. She appreciated his resolve, finding it a stark contrast to the indecision he had shown in the days leading up to her exile. He was emerging as a leader shaped by hard lessons. One crisp afternoon, she accompanied him along the boundary, where the forest opened into rolling hills. The conversation drifted to the future of the pack. He spoke of forging deeper alliances with honorable neighbors, of reinvigorating trade without exploitative deals, of inviting wise rogues to share knowledge that might benefit them all. She observed him carefully, noting that he no longer carried the weight of indecision that once marred his judgment. He seemed more comfortable in his own leadership, determined to let the truth guide his choices. A sense of quiet respect grew between them on that walk, a reminder that while the past was fraught with pain, the future might hold a chance at genuine reconciliation. They paused at a ridge overlooking the lands where the Silver Crescent pack had flourished for generations. She recalled how, years ago, she stood at this very spot after a successful negotiation with a neighboring pack, her heart light with triumph and hope. It felt like a lifetime had passed since then. The Alpha turned to her, as though reading her memories in her expression. "You taught me a lesson I can never forget," he said softly, the wind rustling the grass around them. "Never let fear or pride blind you to the truth, no matter how convincing a lie might appear." She gave a small nod, eyes lingering on the horizon. A swirl of emotions tumbled within her, admiration for the progress he had made, sadness for everything lost, and a cautious optimism. "And you taught me," she said quietly, "that even those who have made grave mistakes can find a way to mend what was broken, as long as they are willing to face the pain of their own regrets." A gentle silence settled between them. No grand declarations were made, no immediate decisions about the reinstatement of her Luna status. They simply shared a quiet moment, acknowledging how far they had come. Overhead, the sun moved westward, casting golden rays across the pack's territory. If she listened closely, she could almost sense a hum of promise in the air, a stirring of new beginnings, untainted by the web of lies that once ensnared them. In the following weeks, the story of her return and the beta's downfall became a cautionary tale whispered among the younger wolves. The pack adapted new mechanisms for accountability, ensuring that no single individual could hold undue influence. A group of council members, the Alpha included, drafted more transparent guidelines to oversee alliances and resource distribution. As each day passed, the territory pulsed with a renewed sense of hope, albeit tempered by the memory of betrayal.